This happened like 13 years ago when I was 16 or 17 years old. I used to hang out with my summer apartment neighbors, and we were all coming together from different places to that town on summer, and neighbor to neighbor we ended up being a lot of people. Well, it results that a neighbor of my neighbor was some kind of experienced user of a Ouija board, and with all the stories he told us, we decided to give it a try. Then, one night, we went to a park near the station with a board we made that day with a piece of wood material that we painted there. The alphabet, yes, no, hello, bye, and 0 to 9. It was very symmetric, and we were proud of it. At first we were five, and we slightly put our fingers on the glass situated at the center of the board, and Nacho started to say, if there were any entities that would want to contact us, say yes. He repeated this 4 or 5 times, and the glass started to tremble. We were all amazed at this point because no one can make a glass tremble with just a finger on it without being too obvious. Then Nacho said, now, to get stronger, make circles around the center of the board, and it gradually was getting more speed and more accuracy. He said, now for being sure that nobody is moving the glass, we will take our fingers out and put on again one by one. And the glass continued to make perfect circles at an outstanding and stable speed and accuracy. Now, go to the edge of the board and leave half glass outside of the board and do the same at the opposite edge, he said. I think this was totally for free and unnecessary, but it was perfectly accurate, executed the several times it had done that. Then we started to talk with it. I remember a few things and disordered. Meanwhile, we were there, more friends were arriving, and we ended up being 15 to 20 people around the board, but just 5 of us with the fingers in it. It said his name was Victor, and he died of tuberculosis in 18-something. Someone asked him what was his favorite football team, and it said Nastic A1, and someone said that Nastic was being promoted to a first division recently. Someone asked where it shit, and it said in your face. All of us started to laugh, and while we were laughing, it said Jejejej, and that scared us way more. We asked it if he wanted to smoke because we were smoking weed and drinking. It said yes. Then Nacho lifted up a little glass and poured a leaf inside it. I remember too that Nacho asked at the beginning of the session if it didn't want any one of us whom were with the fingers on the board, and the glass pointed to a girl that was on a very skeptical mood and joking about all this stuff. She withdrew her fingers. Everything was smooth and cool until it said go, quick. We asked why, and it just repeat that. We asked if it can say bye. It said bye. We left the place, and 5 minutes later, it started to rain. I don't know if it was concerned about us to get wet, or if it was for another something. We tried to make another session that day, but without Nacho, it didn't work. I'm sure this was because of Nacho's absence. And that's all. I just wanted to share my experience. When I was 10 or 11, my friend bought an Ouija board at her house. I didn't want any part of it because I believed in demons, but my friend and sister thought it was funny and asked how old I'll be when I die. It said 14. Then they asked how, and it said it was from a black car. About 3 years later, when I was 14, other friends started saying that they had dreams of me being killed by a car accident and being hit while crossing the road. I immediately asked about the car each time, and they said it was a black truck or black car. Multiple friends said this, and when I told them about what the board said, they were freaked out. Some will think that it was my sister playing an elaborate joke, but this was 3 years after the board, and she's not a prankster, and neither are my friends. Anyway, they had these dreams for months and would tell me at lunch. Then another friend who was in a separate grade was talking to us, and she turned to me and said something like, hey, I had a weird dream that I was at a funeral. Your siblings and parents were there, we were all there, but you weren't. I'm not 100% sure who the funeral was for, but I'm pretty sure it was yours. This happened a few weeks before my 15th birthday, so I was freaked. Not long after my friend's dreams, my mom got a black car, and it made me even more scared. A big black Mercedes. Granted, there was a lot of black Mercedes cars in my own town, but it still made me nervous. The weeks leading up to my 15th birthday consisted of me being extra careful crossing the street and always wearing my seatbelt. I was relieved when my birthday came and passed, but still, it haunts me. Such a bizarre experience. When I was 17, my friend George was attacked by something supernatural right in front of me. My friends and I were very intrigued by Ouija boards towards the end of high school. We spent several nights over a few months cramming together and hovering over a planchette. We had a variety of experiences using the Ouija board. most of which you could describe as mildly supernatural or plain old coincidence. One of the places we would frequent was George's garage in his family home. Like most garages, it was dark, damp, and clustered. George was as intrigued by the Ouija board as we all were. This was until he started to target George. Over the course of different sittings, we would all ask different kinds of questions like who it was, what it wanted, how many fingers were behind my back. We still weren't convinced it was legit. We had the spirit tell us who they were, and when prompted for what they wanted, they replied, "Kill George." Needless to say, George was spooked, but in order to save face, he persevered. A sitting following that, we had asked the same questions. As the conversation developed, a now different spirit had changed its mind and decided it was the previous spirit and that it still wanted to kill George. This, paired with several events that George had experienced himself in the nights that followed, had driven George away from our little seances. We, however, were still more than happy to tinker around, and were not satisfied yet. On the last night we played the Ouija board, we set up George's garage as we usually did. He said that he had no problem with us using it in his garage, and in his presence he just did not want to participate. That night it was just George, two girls, and I. We turned out the lights and set up the board. We even lit a candle or two for good effect. George and one girl sat across from the other girl and I. We were all in coats because it was winter and the garage was poorly insulated. The three of us, with our hands on the planchette, had barely begun when George's coat arm caught on fire. I remember watching him fling his arm around as he tried to smother the flame. I immediately jumped up and turned on the lights. It didn't take long for George to put out the flame. We quickly piled out of the garage into his basement. After a few moments of panic and confusion, we diverted our attention to George. He took off his coat and swore his arm was fine. There wasn't a single mark on his skin. Then we diverted our attention to the nearly charred coat arm. The burn was about the radius of a fist, and it burned deeply through the layers, just shy of the inner layer of cloth. The most startling part was that it was undeniably the shape of a goat's hoof. We hid the coat away for several days. Once we gained the courage, George and I pulled it back out in an attempt to debunk our little experience. After all, there were open flames in the room, and he had a cigarette in his hand. We applied a cigarette directly onto the opposite coat arm several times. We took a lighter in it in another attempt to simulate the same kind of flame. No matter what we tried, we wouldn't come close to recreating the hoof-like burn. Over time, I thought that maybe George had decided to stage the whole thing in an effort to deter us from the Ouija board. He certainly had motive. That was 10 years ago, and George and I are still great friends. Occasionally, I get confident that when I get him to fess up, I press him on the subject. It's been 10 years and he still has the same response, that he loved that coat and he was just as surprised and terrified as we were. Personally, I don't believe he staged it. I believe that we experienced was authentic, and my perspective on life was never the same since.